I'm Jack Davis, and welcome to another guided meditation, this time in front of some really astounding nature that puts into perspective the scale of our human lifetimes. There's really nothing we could achieve or create on Earth that is going to seem significant from the perspective of this valley. I couldn't possibly count the trees. I couldn't possibly comprehend the length of time that would be required to create this valley. And it is awe-inspiring. And you don't say that in a sappy way. It really is. If you can take a moment to put your life on pause, put your plans on pause, whatever, human things that you're going through in your life, and just remind yourself that life is a lot bigger than you. And ultimately, what I feel compelled to say is something from my favorite philosopher, Bernardo Kastrup. And it's that your life is not about you. We think it's about ourselves because we're deeply identified with this ego, with human consciousness and with egoic consciousness. But nature can show us just how insignificant that human perspective is. And Bernardo Kastrup is not just some philosopher. He, I think, is the most successful recent philosopher in terms of creating a theory of reality that integrates everything that indigenous cultures and Eastern cultures have known about reality for a long time with our, innovations in science that have come through over the last few hundred years in particular. For me and for him, consciousness is fundamental, and all of life can be broken down not into matter, not into physical things, but into conscious experience, into direct perception. Now, I understand that that can seem confusing because, is my jacket conscious? I don't think so. But are the trees around me conscious? Are the trees around me alive? I would suggest that they are. I would suggest that they are. And it takes being in a physical space like this to really start to appreciate the reality of this situation. It's not something that you experience if you're living in a city, living a normal job, driving to and from work, and just thinking about your immediate needs and concerns. But it's something that can kind of come to you if you're in the right receptivity and sort of if you're energetically matched to the nature around you. These trees, I'm not sure they know anything of time. They obviously don't have minds and brains, so their conscious experience, to the extent that I can comprehend it, it wouldn't be anything like mine. But I'm quite confident that the only thing out there is conscious experience. And everything that I see around me is a symbolic representation of other conscious experience. I'm looking at a rock because rocks I find challenging. I'm very confident that there's nothing conscious in this or in this or in the piece of technology recording this video. Rocks, they're sort of in between something that's living and something that's part of nature and something that's inanimate. Bernardo Kastrup uses metabolism as a bit of a clue as to whether something that has a seemingly separate existence has conscious inner experience. So trees would meet that criteria. They're definitely metabolizing, they're living, they're taking in what's around them and using that to sustain their own life, just as we do that as human beings. The rock, I'm not so sure about, but you see people touching rocks and connecting to rocks, particularly people on a spiritual path. And I feel like you can connect to something. Maybe it's not the consciousness of this rock. Maybe it's just some sort of a energetic thing. I can't really put it into words. Maybe it's just a sense of this is a part of life that isn't living like humans do. And it's not so fickle and vain as, materials that we create as human beings for short-term profit. It's interesting. There's something quite timeless about a valley like this. And I think it's because time isn't something that we necessarily need to experience in life. We've known for a long time, we've known for quite some time that time and space aren't fundamental. That when we look at the science and we look at the mathematics behind reality and we try and really piece things together, time isn't necessary. And in fact, when we try and account for time in the mathematics, it doesn't add up. So it's almost as if reality is giving us the answers to the questions that we're asking. And it's really showing us that this experience of time that we have as humans is sort of an optional extra placed on top of some sort of an ever present, timeless reality. And I would confidently say that this ever present, timeless reality is something that you can more easily tap into amongst nature. Because I think it's a state of consciousness, a state of reality that nature thrives in. And potentially it's what nature experiences in totality. Um, when I say that time isn't fundamental, I'm not suggesting that you're not watching a video and seconds aren't going by and you can't, check the clock. Of course you can do that. When I say time isn't fundamental, I mean time is an appearance, just in the same way that temperature is an appearance or thought is an appearance. It's sort of like sensation or data. If we want to wade into this matrix concept, and I'm hesitant to do so, you could think of all of your experience as being made up of just sort of sensory inputs. You can imagine zeros and ones on a screen. And your thoughts, your sensations, your emotions, your memories, all of that is just a different type of data on the screen of consciousness. And time is some of that data. You can't have time without data coming through. So it's sort of as if the ever present reality is something like a void. This isn't a complete representation of reality, but this is what will come through in many of the Buddhist teachings and the Zen teachings, pretty much all of the teachings about ontology and the nature of reality. There's something of a timeless, nameless, ever present, I can't give it a name, reality, thing upon which we place time and space.